I love Magic the Gathering, I love Civilization 6, merge the two together and you end up with a whole bunch of videos from some guy on the internet who created some homemade cards based off of Civilization 6. Oh, look at that guy is me. I am Loki the Gamer to amuse you and confuse you, and let's take a look at the Zulu bundle of this grand project. The Zulu will have 6 cards like usual, 1 legendary land, 1 leader, 2 unique builds, 1 card based off the agenda of the leader, and 1 bonus card derived from my imagination and inspired by other concepts in this bundle. So a very straightforward civ with 1 leader. An overview of the Zulu tells us that we'll be talking about the concept of conquering a city. Of course, like usual, I've had to use my creativity to turn that into a magic-compatible concept, and not for the first time I decided that the act of conquering a city would simply mean dealing combat damage to a player. You've gone over the head of their creatures by either trampling or unblockable damage. Basically, you've gone over their defenses, much like city defenses, and therefore, yeah, you've conquered a city. So there will be things that trigger when you conquer a city. They will trigger when you deal combat damage to a player, in Magic terms. We'll be talking about, of course, cores and armies. The Zulu are big on that. If you've never played the Zulu, and if you love domination games, lots of players only ever play domination games. That is not my typical way of playing. I don't prefer domination games, but I did play the Zulu, I did play domination, and I dare say I had a lot of fun. Relying on cores and armies that are so powerful, it's amazing, and you access them so early in the game, it's a lot of fun. And we will turn that into Magic by using the concept of amass. I use the keyword of amass, seen in Amonkhet and Lord of the Rings. So to turn the concept of cores and armies into Magic, I used a combination of, indeed, amass, but also +1/+1 counters, which is kind of the same thing, because when you think about it, amass uses, indeed, +1/+1 counters. There'll be the concept of experience, gaining experience and promotions through things like encampment buildings, things like that, and we will turn that in Magic into more +1/+1 counters still. There'll be gold bonuses, those always turn into ramping, and there'll be science, those always turn into draw. The color scheme of the Zulu will be red and green, so yes, very militaristic, very violent in their warlike nature, so red is very appropriate, and green because they also have a peaceful demeanor and very in tune with nature, so yes, a combination of war and peace, red and green seems to be perfect for the Zulu. The ability of the Zulu in Civilization 6 is called Easy Bongo. And this Easy Bongo says that the Zulu can learn to play the bongos with extra ease. Now that is, of course, a hilarious joke, and it rather says cities with garrisoned unit get extra loyalty per turn, and extra loyalty if it's a core or army. I didn't use that in the legendary land of Zululand. However, conquering a city with a unit will upgrade that unit into a core or army. And that I did use. So the land of the Zululand, is a mythic rare that taps for a green or a red. And the Easy Bongo ability says, tap Zululand. The next time target creature you control deals combat damage to a player this turn, you may pay mana equal to its mana value. If you do, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to its power. So yeah, you get to essentially kind of amass, but not really amass on an army token, as you normally do amass, but instead you amass on that creature. So that creature essentially doubles in strength after it conquers a city, i.e. after it deals combat damage to a player, but only if you pay its mana value again. So it's very balanced, I think, because it's not cheap. Well, of course it could be cheap if the creature is cheap, but then you're probably not going to get a lot of boosts from that. But you could use that for a big, huge, fat creature if you are willing to pay its big, huge, fat mana cost. So yeah, I think that's very neat, and again, it doesn't come instantly. You must be able to deal damage with that creature, and if your opponent sees that you have this ace in your hole, Zululand is right there, they know it's an option. Maybe they'll take extra care to fully block that creature to prevent you from doing that, from turning it into a core army and double its power. Shaka, the leader of the Zulu, has an ability called Amabutho. May form corps and armies much earlier than other civs, and an additional base combat strength to corps and armies. Very straightforward. I had to find a way for Shaka to create corps and armies using the amass keyword, and also give that army a little leg up. So really, I transformed the exact concept of forming a corps and army in Civ 6 into Magic, the exact same way that you do it in Civ 6, you'll do it in Magic. In Civ 6, what do? You have to merge 2 units into one. So in Magic, you'll have to sacrifice 2 units and then create a brand new one, which is a combination of the 2, which will use Amass. And that's what I did. Shaka cast for 1 green, 2 red, 3 generic, so an expensive man here. He is a rare human rebel warrior, 6/6, so hint hint, rebel. There's been many other civs out there, especially one I can think of that has his exact colors, who deeply care about having rebel as a creature type, so do consider Shaka as a great addition to those decks. And the Amabutho ability says, sacrifice 2 creatures, pay a green and a red, tap Shaka, amass humans X, where X is the total of the sacrificed creature's power. Then create a white aura enchantment token named Mask attached to that army. The token has enchant permanent and Umbra armor. Does that sound familiar? I love reusing existing things in Magic, such as keywords like Amass, actually, but even more than that, to reuse strange, very esoteric tokens that were spawned by 1 card in the history of Magic, and that's what I did. The Mask token is something that comes from Estrid the Masked, that planeswalker that produces these Mask Aura tokens, so I thought, why not? That's exactly what I want the armies of Shaka to have. I want them to have some protection, so I'll use the concept of the Mask. And it even opens the door for a potential Enchantress type of deck with this commander, because, yeah, he's going to regularly pop some auras in play, so it would totally be worth it to stack that deck with a few effects that trigger when an enchantment or an aura enters. And of course, don't forget that this happens anytime that you amass. So, of course, amassing always increases the size of your army. It does not create a new army each time. That's how amass works. If you already have an army, then you just boost that existing army. So you don't get several armies, no, but you will always get a new mask. So your 1 army token might have 2, 3, upwards of who knows how many mask tokens on it. So each one has Umbra armor, so that's a lot of protection. It's very difficult to actually get rid of an army of any creature that has a whole bunch of Umbra armors on them. Don't forget, the Umbra armor keyword is that if that creature would die, instead of dying, you just remove the Umbra armor from it. So it gives your army extra lives. Oh, it died? Okay, 1 armor goes off. Oh, it died again. 1 armor goes off again. So it doesn't matter how many times it dies in battle, how many times it gets targeted for removal, only the masks are only ever taken off. You need to get rid of all the masks to finally get rid of the army. And then guess what? Shaka will just start creating a brand new one. Now let's talk about that actually. Which creatures would you put in a Shaka deck? You would want creatures that give you a benefit when they die. Eggs, essentially. So creatures that give you a benefit upon death. So you pop them onto the battlefield and then you sacrifice them to make armies out of them. And you get the army, obviously, and the mask on the army. And then you get the benefit of those 2 creatures dying. So that would be the way to go. That's how I would build that deck. And I like eggs. I like aristocrat type decks, and especially when the creatures themselves give you something when they die. In my toolbox deck, I've used a whole bunch of those, and sure enough, most of them are indeed green and red. Because in that deck, I blitz my creatures, so they will die at the end of turn for sure, either through the blitz or through another one of my sack outlets before the end of the turn. So I want a benefit when they die, so I've used so many of them. Those would go in the Shaka deck as well. Now let's take a look at the Impy unique unit. The Impy unit has a whole bunch of things going for it. It is anti-cavalry, so you can expect some bonuses when it fights a mounted unit. It gets extra XP, so it grows experience quicker than most units, so you can expect me to turn that into earning +1/+1 counters. And it gets extra flanking bonus. Now, it's not the first time that I've run across something like that. A unit in Civ 6 that has flanking abilities. Well, all units in Civ 6 have flanking abilities. That is an often forgotten concept. When several of your units are standing next to each other and you attack with one of them, the fact that your unit has some buddies next to it will give it a fighting bonus. That is known as the flanking bonus. It's there to represent that even though, yes, combat in Civ 6 is always 1v1, one unit attacks one unit, the fact that you've got some friends near you is there to symbolize, to simulate the concept of one massive all-out war between several units. It's still 1v1, but the bonus fakes it. It makes it seem like it's several units of fighting all at once. And of course, defending units get a similar bonus when they have friendly units near them. They get what it's called a support bonus, but we're not here to talk about that. The MP unit only receives a flanking bonus. And whenever that has happened in this project, I've always relied on one existing magic keyword. I'll give you 3 guesses. It's flanking, of course. There is an ability called flanking, and it simply says that whenever a creature with flanking is blocked by a creature without flanking, then those blocking creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. So I made sure that the MP had flanking. So here's the creature. An uncommon human warrior for 3 mana, green, red, 1 generic. It's 3/1, and I chose stats of 3/1, and it leads to some interesting decisions. You'll see. So let's skip the fact that it has a kicker and the consequence of the kicker, and let's go straight to the third ability. It says whenever this creature receives combat damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it at the end of combat. That is to represent the extra XP. So it gets promotions quicker, so it just needs to receive combat damage and it'll get a boost. But hold on, how can it ever receive combat damage? It's 3/1. If it receives 0 damage because you prevented the damage or something like that, then it received no damage. 0 is no damage. If it receives some damage, then that means at least 1, and then it would die. It says that it gets its counter at the end of combat, and by then, it's already dead. Of course, there are ways to cheat that. You give it a boost, any sort of boost, either through an aura, a static anthem, anything. You can easily boost it and make that ability not so irrelevant. But that's not enough. I wanted it to have a built-in way of combating that limitation, and that's where the kicker comes into play. So kicker of green, and when this creature enters, if it was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it does have a built-in extra boost, but only if you pay. So it could enter as 4/2, and then conceivably it could receive 1 combat damage and survive to receive its experience counter that comes in the form of a +1/+1 counter. And of course, there's the whenever this creature blocks a horse or a mount, it gains double strike until end of turn. A lot of the time I said whenever this creature blocks or is blocked by, but in this case, no, I wanted to give them specifically a blocking bonus, not when attacking and blocked by a horse or mount. And finally, there's the flanking. That's it. So it does a lot of things. Do any of these things actually synergize with Shaka? Not really, because it's not an egg. It doesn't have any when this creature dies or something cool happens. It does get +1/+1 counters, so if you want to build your deck, focusing not so much on the sacrifice aspect of the ability, but more on the +1/+1 counters, then sure, maybe they might have a space, but otherwise it stands rather on its own, like most unique units, really, that I've created in this project. Usually my pride and joy comes from the legendary creatures, the commanders, the leaders, and the legendary lands sometimes, and the unique improvements as well, but not so much the unique unit. Speaking of the unique improvement, that of the Zulu is called Ikanda. It replaces the encampment, so it's a super encampment, so expect once again some military-related bonuses and powers and abilities, but it also provides us some gold and a little bit of science, so a little bit of gold, a little bit of science, so expect a little bit of ramp and a little bit of draw. I turned it into an artifact creature construct. That costs 5, 1 red, 4 generic, uncommon. It has Defender, 3/8. It's a district, it's an encampment, so of course, if it is going to be a creature, it's going to have Defender. The Ikanda is not going to stomp around being a creature across the landscape, of course. And being a Defender, I was able to give it some fairly good stats. And it says whenever you amass that value +1, so it enhances your amass. Then add 1 colorless or draw a card. If you draw a card this way, discard a card. So there you go, you've got a small gold bonus and a small science bonus. The science bonus is quite small because you don't even get to draw a card outright. You draw, then discard, so it's really a mini draw. And you don't get both, you get the mana or the draw. And that choice only triggers when you amass. It's all part of the same triggered ability. So in the game, the Ikanda boosts are very minimal, and sure enough, they are minimal on my card as well. The extra amass and the good blocker is the real point. With that being said, do you think that 5 is a justified cost, or is it too much? I don't know, you tell me. The agenda of Shaka Zulu is called Horn, Chest, Loins. Basically, he loves corps and armies, big surprise there, and he doesn't like those who don't use them. So I made an instant that allowed you to use your army to kill something else that wasn't an army. Basically, one of the many green effects that make creatures fight. As of this recording, I'm building a Legolas deck, and I'm gonna put a whole lot of such effects in the deck. So I made one more, but of course this one uses the concept of armies, so it is useless if you don't have an army. The card costs 4, 2 green, 2 generic for a common. Target army you control deals damage equal to its power, distributed as you choose among any number of target non-army creatures. Those creatures each deal damage equal to their power to that army. So there you go, very useful, but only in the right deck. So of minimal versatility, and that's why it's only a common. And finally, I needed one last idea for the bundle of the Zulu, and why not use the concept of the corps or armies and make a card out of that? So we already have the Impy as the unique unit, well, I gave them the Impy Corps. So it's the only time that I gave 2 different versions of the unique unit to a Civ, one being regular version and the other one being the core version. Why not? I don't know why I chose to make the Impy Core green only, while the regular Impy was green-red. If there was a reason for that, I forgot, but I'm sticking to my guns, figuring that there must have been a reason originally. Oh yeah, there it is, because it uses a keyword that's been very often seen in green, but not exclusively in green, so again, it could have had some red and we wouldn't have called the police over it. So the Impy Core cost 4 mana, 1 green, 3 generic, Human Warrior common, and for 1 green you tap it and you amass humans 1. And it's a 4/4. So there you go, so you can keep amassing your human army, or from your hand you can use the good old channel keyword. Yes, the channel is an ability that you use while the card is in your hand. You discard the card, you pay a cost, and then you do some effect. Usually a channel effect will be the equivalent of having given the card's strength to something else in play. It's kind of like the equivalent, and sure enough, that's what I did. Here it says, channel, pay 2 green and 1 generic, discard Impy Core, amass humans 4. So the Impy Core itself is 4/4, and if you channel it, you are given its powers 4 to your army. So you are either casting it for a separate independent 4/4 that can slowly amass your armies by 1 each turn, or you discard it outright and pay its channel cost to boost your armies by 4, a one-time 4 boost. You're working the strength of the Impy Core into your army. And that is the very nature of a channel ability, so I'm quite proud of having used channel effectively and by respecting what channel is. Speaking of channel, why not you subscribe to mine? That's the right thing to say at the end of these videos, and we have just about reached the end. So what do you think of Shaka Zulu? Would you build it with indeed a lot of eggs? I would love to do that. Or focus on the +1/+1 counters. I think those are the two major ways of taking an idea like that. And also, I have an army deck. I've got a Saruman deck that amasses and amasses and amasses insane quantities of orcs. And with that deck, in order to eventually secure a win, I've got some trample or unblockable or flinging abilities that allow me to use my army and finally go in for the kill and win. So a deck like that, a deck with Shaka that amasses a lot of humans, might want to think of throwing in some flinging, trample, or unblockable abilities, just like my Saruman deck. Otherwise, an army, a big, huge, fat army, is too easy to block. Your opponent sends a single tiny soldier, and that poor little chump blocker takes all the damage, and the game goes on and on and on. So yes, trample and things like that are definitely needed for an army-based deck. Oh, and something else just came to mind, going all the way back to the beginning with a Zulu land card. You have to pay the amount of value of the target creature to double its strength through +1/+1 counters, but what if the creature has no mana value, such as an army token? Then you pay nothing! So the Zulu land ability could really double the value of your army for nothing. That is amazing. So I believe now that's everything, and let me know if there's anything else I forgot. I know I didn't forget to mention subscribing. I did say that, right? I didn't mention kneeling, but you know what happens when people kneel to Loki. He gets tossed around by a giant green monster, and I get called puny. Let's not delve on that, and let's instead focus on liking the video, subscribing. My Patreon is ready to take your beautiful donations. Buy me a coffee. Or better yet, buy me a magic pack, isn't that better? And I'll talk to you later. Thank you for your wonderful support.